Alright, we're going to jump right in here. This is everything that you're going to need to start drawing on your GoCupy. An SSH client, GIMP, Inkscape, Python, and these 5 files here, which the download links will be in the description. It is best if you create a new folder and place all of these from their zip files into the new folder. For some reason, I have trouble with the Python scripts if I don't put them into a new folder. So also you're going to need this file here, which you will create if you just open a new notepad. You can either type this in, or if you go over to the GoCupy forum, I have a post that is pinned up there where you can just copy and paste. You're going to have to replace this with the path to your Python exe, and this to the path to your TS part file, which is one of the things in here. Also, you'll have to edit this TS part file, which you can do using some of the things that are installed with Python. This idle is how you can edit this part file. If you just drop it onto idle, it'll automatically open up. And if you go down to line, I believe it's 76 or 72, your line number is down here in the bottom right corner. Right here. So 76, you're going to replace this with the path to your linker exe, which should be in the same folder as the TS part file. And then you're going to change this, which is about 40 million to begin with. You're going to change that to 0. And if you just save that, you can close all of this. So this file, you're going to have your path to your Python exe. And if you're using Portable Python, you're going to have to remove the spaces from the folder paths. The script does not handle spaces in your path names very well. And then right here is the path to your TS part file. And then will save this as a .bat file. So whenever you run it, it'll pop up like this. It'll ask you for the PBM file that you're going to create. Alright, so there's one more program that you may or may not need depending on how you want to do this. If you want to connect a monitor and keyboard to your Raspberry Pi, you won't need this at all. But Nmap will allow you to scan your network to find the IP address of your Raspberry Pi without having to connect the keyboard and monitor to the Pi. So in the description, I'll post a download link and a link that'll show you how to do this on Mac and Linux. But for Windows, you're going to want to go to Control Panel. You're going to want to Network and Internet, Network and Sharing Center, and then you're going to want to open up the network that your computer shares with your Raspberry Pi. And then you're going to click Details, and you're going to look for your IPv4 address. Now you're going to want to pay attention specifically to the last 3 digits, but you'll need to know the whole thing. After that, you can close out of all of this and open up ZenMap, which is a GUI that installs with Nmap that will allow you to work with it more easily. So for your target, you're going to want to set a range that your computer's IP address falls in between. So mine was 117, so I'm going to search from 100 to 120, because your Raspberry Pi is going to connect very closely to your computer's IP address, most likely. It all depends on how many things are connected to your network currently. You're going to change your profile to ping scan and just hit scan, and it'll go for a second, and then it'll list all the things on your network. Now, it's good to note that if you're connected to Wi-Fi like I am, your Raspberry Pi will not show Raspberry Pi Incorporated or whatever under the manufacturer. It will show whatever your manufacturer is for your Wi-Fi USB dongle, which is what I'm displaying right here. But if you were to connect via Ethernet, it would say Raspberry Pi Inc. or something similar to that, where mine says ASRock Incorporation. But after you found your IP address, you can then open up PuTTY. We're going to start by SSHing into our Raspberry Pi. So once you know your IP address, you can start PuTTY. Your host name will be what your IP address is equal to 1.13. There we go. So whenever you log in, you'll be brought to this screen. The username will default to Pi. The password will default to Raspberry. And then after a successful login, you'll be greeted with the Pi at GokuPi screen. Now I like to use WinSCP to drag and drop files onto my Raspberry Pi, and it's very similar to logging into PuTTY. You'll just type in your IP You'll just type in your IP address, and then the username you'll type in here, your password. Now the thing I like about WinSCP is you can hit save right here, and it'll bring up your login, and then you can hit save password, create desktop shortcut, and you'll see it pop up right here. And if you close this, it will automatically create this shortcut on your desktop that will log in to the Raspberry Pi. Now the first time you log into the Pi, it'll come up with this because you need to know your server fingerprint, but if you know for a fact that your IP address leads to your Pi, then you can just say yes, and it'll bring up this neat little FTP layout. Now to do this in PuTTY is a little different. To do it in PuTTY, you have to right click and create a shortcut, and once you have your shortcut made, you go to properties, and after the target you will type in Pi at IP address, and then space minus PW, and then type your password, and that should, you may have to have quotations around the path name. Nope, there it goes. Alright, so that's how you can set up auto login for your SSH using PuTTY and using WinSCP. Next we're going to make a basic SVG without pinup or colors. You can just open up GIMP, go to new, and you can do whatever size that you would like. I typically work with standard size pieces of paper, so I'll put in half the size of the piece of paper. That way when I draw it, I can stretch it to the full size of the paper. Now I typically do 100 pixels per inch because it seems to get me a good amount of white space in between each line. I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to do a basic text box here. I'm going to bold this. So there I have my GokuPi lettering. Now in order to get it into an SGV, you're going to want to have it to be grayscaled. And it doesn't affect this one because it's all black and white, but if it were colored, you would want to adjust the colors in grayscale. And then you're going to go to levels, and the way that this works, whenever it converts it to, it's going to convert it to dots first, and the darker the hue, the more dots there's going to be, and the lighter, the less dots. So white will have 0 dots, and G will have a maximum amount of dots, which typically looks like a checkered flag because there are so many so close together. Typically this is about the hue where it starts to look good, so you can just select whatever select whatever hue that you want there. You can go to image, mode, indexed, and you're going to select black and white 1-bit palette, and then go to normal and hit convert, and you'll see the number of dots here, and you can zoom in. But if that doesn't suit you, you can always undo it again, and then select levels, and then readjust the levels. So say we want more dots, we can make it darker, mode, indexed, and then now we have far more dots than we did previously. Just get this back to where we need it. Alright, so now you're ready to export your document. Now you're going to want to export it as a .pbm file, which is farther down the list. There we go. I'm going to put this in my drawings folder that I've created. Rename this GoCuPy. Now I'm going to hit export raw and then minimize this. Now for some reason that didn't go into my drawings folder, but that's okay. So now you have your PBM file. This is where your .bat file comes into play. So once you double click your .bat file, it'll open up, and if you're using my version, it will ask you for the file path, or if you can just drag and drop the file directly into the window. And then you'll hit enter, and this window will open up, and that converts your PBM file. Now we have into the same folder that our PBM was, we now have an SGV file. If we take this, we can open this up into Inkscape. Oops, that's not how I wanted to do that at all. So right click this, we should be able to open with Inkscape. Alright, there we go. So now we have our SGV line drawing of GoCuPy. Now what you can do from here is if you select this tool right here, your path tool, you can click on this and you can zoom in and you can adjust these nodes. Now don't do this. If you see this little handle grip right here, the GoCuPy cannot handle curves, and we'll get into this in the troubleshooting portion. But if that happens, just go ahead and undo whatever path move that you just made. But you can come out here and you can adjust whatever paths that you want to adjust and have them look however you would like. And this is fairly easy. So now we can save this and close this out. Now this is why I use WinSPC, because it makes this very easy. I just open up WinSPC, automatically connects to my Raspberry Pi. I can navigate to my drawings folder. Here you can see my GoCuPy SVG. I can just drop it straight into the home folder of the Pi. And there you can see it right here. It's transferred over. Okay. Now I'm going to log in to PuTTY. Now this is where you'll have to set up your GoCuPy, and there's another tutorial video, and I'll hopefully insert a video here, and transfer it to the Pi. You can log into your Pi, and typically you would need to run the GoCuPy setup command and then type in your measurements from whenever you set up your GoCuPy. So you would type in the measurement from between each spool, and then from one spool to the gondola and from the other spool to the gondola. I won't be actually drawing, so I'm not going to do that. To see a list of commands, you can just type GoCuPy and then hit enter, and you can see all of these commands. There are a couple that I'd like to talk about. The first one being pause. If you're going to do a multicolored if you're going to draw a multicolored SVG, then you're going to want to use the pause flag, because it will pause the SVG every time it gets to the end of a path. Now, one color may have several paths, and that's fine. You just will hit enter and not change the pen, but this will allow you to change the pen without having to draw multiple SVGs. The next one I want to talk about is toImage. This is very helpful whenever you're first learning how to create SVGs, and we're going to go I'm going to do this one here in a second. So toImage will cause the GoCupy to output its draw path. So if there's going to be an error or a path isn't going to show up in the right place, this will output that to a PNG file and allow you to catch it before you're actually trying to draw it. And the next one that's fairly important is slow factor. If you're drawing a very small or very circular SVG file, it could cause it to get a little fast and actually cause the gondola to bounce around or be out of place. And the slow factor will allow you to slow down the drawing. So say if I wanted to draw the GoCupy SVG that we just made, I would type GoCupy space minus slow factor equals, we'll just say 2 minus toImage because I'm going to output it, and then SVG, and then however big you would like to draw it. I'm going to draw this one 254 millimeters, and then I need the path, so /home /pi /GoCupy.svg, and then you'll see these commands. Well, if you use the help command under SVG, there are two ways that you can draw an SVG, and there's top and then there's box. Now top will scan from the top of the SVG down, and the first path that it end of a path that it comes across on the left hand side. So if there are two paths that start at the same height, that'll choose the one on the left, and it'll start from there and continue drawing. Now box will draw, well, it will highlight a box by going around the entirety of the photo or the drawing, and it'll outline the drawing space, and then it will continue from, I believe, whatever it's closest to when it finishes the square, but I can't recall. So I'm going to do this from top. So we'll hit this, and this is what it spits out whenever it generates the SVG path. So if I go back over to my WinSCP, you can see that right here is an output ping. I'll open, and there it is. There is the draw path for GoCupy. And you can see each node. That's how that works. Alright, so next we're going to go into use pinup. So say you want to use pinup and you don't want all these lines crossing over your image. So if we open up an Inkscape, the drawing that we just made a moment ago, we can use this path tool, and pinup is always working even if you don't have a motor on there. If you don't have the servo on there to lift up the pin, the command still goes through. But this just creates the command at these points. So really, if you were to do this without a servo, it would still try and draw with the pinup. But so you can select each point that each line that you don't want to exist. So I don't want that one to exist or that one. I'm going to get rid of all these points. Oops. In between each letter. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to click. If you hit delete, it won't work. You'll have to go up here and actually click delete segment between two non-endpoint nodes. And that will get rid of it'll get rid of all your in between lines. So now if you were to use the pause function, every time it got to the end of one of these lines, it would pause, wait for you to hit enter or any other key, and then it would start up. Once it got to the end of the next path, it would wait for you to hit enter. Now, if you saved it like this and drew it without the pause function, it would draw all of this, pick up the pen, continue here, pick up the pen, continue here, pick up the pen, continue here. Now, if you save this, you'd send it to your Pi like anything else, and then you would draw it the same way that we drew it a second ago using your GokiPi slow factor. Now if you were going to draw this, you would just remove to image, and then that would just cause it to draw the SVG.